the often receive directly from Customs and Border Protection goes way beyond that. It's in Washington as well. Like you can see it embedded in terminology used around the border, like border security. Border security is a term that's used very often, yet it's a word that if you start to unpack it and see what it really means and see does this border fortification, tremendous border fortification, or even mortal situations, and definitely not necessarily secure for people living along the border who are complaining more and more of increased border patrol presence. So what is the word security? What is this border security? I think there are questions that need to be asked about how the sort of public relations line is, the sort of terminology that goes unquestioned and unpacked, and then subsequently the need to then unpack that terminology. Let's see what this border security thing is. Let's see what kind of impacts it has on people. Let's look at the money. Like the knowledge of the money that's put into the border is nil. Like when I've talked about this for years and years and years around the United States, it's amazing how few people actually know the dramatic increases of the budgets put towards the border.
Okay, well, it's not at $2 trillion level of Afghanistan's the war in Afghanistan yet, arguably.
Not that.
But I suppose and perhaps Afghanistan withdrawal meant that some corporations thought this was a way of importing profits back to the homeland after the defeat of the United States in Afghanistan. But given immigrants disproportionately want to work, why would corporations be lobbying on K Street against more immigrants? I mean, clearly the defense contractors have an interest in this border myth, I suppose you might put it, and use that to be able to profiteer by all this border infrastructure. But generally, surely corporations would be saying, we want more immigrants because they need desperately workers to fill all the vacant jobs in the United States.
Sure, yeah. So you will find, well, on one hand, a lot being like when a Homeland Security budget comes up, you will see all these contractors. They'll go in behind closed doors. They're lobbying, all the key people, the appropriations committees, and that sort of thing. But on the other hand, you see, like if you look at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, or you look at other, sectors with interests, you'll see lobbying for more of a comprehensive immigration reform that would include, bringing in more people.
Because corporations depend on illegal immigration right now, right? U.S. corporations.
Right. Yeah. So
some of them might go under if there weren't illegal immigration.
That could very well happen. The state of Alabama, when they put out that law, maybe it was 10 years ago, it was a sort of, papers, please law in which they were going to go after all undocumented people in the state. And there's some really good reporting of what happened after everyone left. Like lots of undocumented workers left the state of Alabama, and the sort of state it left the agribusiness and agri-industry in Alabama during that time.
And I mean, has Joe Biden been worse? $25 billion giveaway of public funds to enforce the border, as they call it, the largest ever, versus Trump, who's still if he's allowed to run, given the U.S. authorities attacking your leading opposition leader in the United States. Is Biden worse than Trump as regards the treatment of those seeking a better life and seeking asylum?
Well, it's right. I mean, the budget for 2023 was actually $29 billion. $29 billion. If you look at Customs and Border Protection and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which the jump from approximately 25 to 26 billion to 29 billion was almost the amount that Trump spent in his the increase during the full 4 years of the Trump administration. So looking at budgets. Like you look at rhetoric, like I like to, as a journalist, I like to look at there's rhetoric and then there's hard numbers and budgets and what's really happening. And if you look at what's been going on with the Biden administration, the budgets are increasing. They're not taking down. They're not taking down, even with all the critique of the big wall that Trump was building during his administration. They're not taking down that wall. In fact, I work for an outlet called the Border Chronicle. We put out a piece looking at how the Biden administration is actually, quote unquote, filling in the gaps of the wall. In other words, continuing to build the wall. But not only that, they're looking at putting more technology, surveillance technology on the border. And you can see the kind of increases of budget and this kind of creation of a virtual or technological border that's happening under Biden. So it's instead of the heavy rhetoric, we're going to stop people from crossing the border, that sort of thing that you got under Trump with this building of this wall. With Biden, you have a lot less of that sort of rhetoric, anti-immigrant rhetoric. They're much more quiet about it. There's much more of a humanitarian language in which it's narrated, yet at the same time, the same exact border enforcement apparatus is in place. And in fact, it's getting bolstered and bigger. And the same sort of impacts are happening on people crossing the border and people living in the borderlands. So what is the difference, right?
Well, Todd Miller, I'll tell you what Biden says in part two. I'll stop you there. More from the co-host of the Border Chronicle podcast and author of Build Bridges, Not Walls, after this break.
Overwhelming bulk of the people of Pakistan have always resented undue foreign influence on our policies. And they have focused on the US, partly because the US is a major global force, but it also has played a critical role at different points in Pakistan's history.
The Biden administration and NATO world are fascinated with soft power and rhetorical shifts. Remember, Ukraine will win and Ukraine is winning. Now we hear Russia is losing and even Russia has lost. Narrative manipulations do not change hard reality.
Welcome back to Going Underground. I'm still here with the co-host of the Border Chronicle podcast and author of Build Bridges, Not Walls, A Journey to a World Without Borders, Todd Miller. Todd, you were saying in part one that Biden is maybe worse than Trump when it comes to the pain and misery of the immigration situation on your southern borders. Biden said in January this year, I sent Congress a comprehensive piece of legislation that would completely overhaul what has been a broken immigration system for a long time, cracking down on illegal immigration, strengthening legal immigration. And then he slagged off the GOP for not helping him out on his big plans. I mean, that's what he says. And you know, he even says people come to America for a whole lot of reasons to seek new opportunity in what is the strongest economy in the world. Can't blame them wanting to do it. They flee oppression. There's the great Joe Biden running for 2024's nomination at the primaries.
Well, that's good campaign stumping, right? That's what it sounds like to me.
How do you square those?
Yeah, you don't. I mean, you probably could go back and go back to 2016 and hear Hillary Clinton say the same thing when she was running, or Barack Obama saying, I mean, not exactly the same thing, but it's very similar things. Like, we are going to bolster legal immigration and cut down on illegal immigration, and those sorts of really the same thing that just spins, or the same sort of sentences that spin around in a circle, and they just keep being repeated and repeated as yet again the budgets just keep getting higher and higher and higher. it helps Biden out, considerably that Trump was right before him, because the kind of media scrutiny that he's going to get on the border is considerably less, given the scrutiny that Trump got. But nothing really fundamentally has changed, except for, I do want to say one thing that differentiates by a Biden from a Trump in a fairly major way is the rhetoric, and the way that the rhetoric can fan the flames of different sort of groups or different constituencies. Particularly, we on the U.S.-Mexico border, we have a problem with militia groups that will go down and patrol the border on their own.
So, in other words, we can expect far-right militias to increase if Trump is reelected president. But then, given that the media representations, well, if they're corporate-owned, obviously they get their funds perhaps through a network that involves some of these military companies. But given the connection then between the sources of the immigration, as he said, as Biden said, they flee oppression, and we know Biden was vice president during the interventions in Haiti, Libya, so on under Obama. Do you think it should be priced in when they do the interventions? I mean, the media should